same way, telling them of Japheth and Ham. And they also inquired themselves in two companies and started for Ham and Japheth. So here God tells the Shemites that there are two other tribes in far-off regions that survived the flood as ye did, and they speak the same language, which is the panic language. So the Shemites inquire, and God provided the Shemites with the journey of two bands of 1,000 people each, making it 2,000 people for the journey of 4 years to the lands of Ham and Japheth. In verse 16, Thus provided God these three separate peoples to go and visit one another, and all in the same period of time. And God said unto them, Very fierce and savage are the Ahuans who inhabit the wilderness on the way. Behold, they eat the flesh of both man and beast, but they will not harm the Ions. Therefore, O my beloved, on your long journey, take with you 20 iron priests. Through the Ions can the Lord your God speak all languages, even the language of the barbarians. So here God tells the 3 tribes in their divisions to take with them iron priests so they will not be harmed by the barbarians who inhabit the forest along the way of their travel. Now in the Lord's fourth book, chapter 2, verse 18 through 21, it states, So it came to pass after a journey of 4 years, the migrants from each country came to the place of their destination, and by their written and spoken words knew they one another, and they called themselves the 3 children of the ark of Noah. And the Lord said unto them, in each of the countries where they had come, Provide records unto the work of God, for these journeys shall be remembered to the end of the world. And in all these countries there were made images of stone and copper, and engravings thereon of the children of Noah, and of the flood, and of the sacred tribes, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 21, And God said, These shall be preserved as the first written names of these lands, and it was so. So here it states, after 4 years, the travelers of Shem, Ham, and Japheth made it to their destination, and they spoke the same language, which is the panic language, conveyed by images and symbols of things in nature. And this is the one language and one speech mentioned in Genesis chapter 11, verse 1, where it stated they spoke one language and one speech. And it also stated that they called themselves the 3 children of the ark of Noah, because they were the remnants and descendants of those people who survived the flood or sinking of Pan, when the earth entered the 17th ark after the creation of man, the ark of Noah. And this is where the name Noah comes from, the name of the 17th ark cycle, not a person. Now, the Lord's fourth book, chapter 3, verse 1 through 3 and 6 through 10, it states, verse 1, For 2 years the migrants tarried in the countries they visited, going much about showing themselves and relating a history of the country whence they came. Then spoke the Lord to the migrants in their respective places, saying, Behold, the time is come for your departure. Gather together, O my beloved, and return to your own countries, and there relate all the glories that your God hath shown you. So they departed and returned to their own respective places, and behold, it took 4 years to accomplish the journey. So here it states that they stayed in each other lands for 2 years, and they started the journey back to their homeland, which was a 4-year journey. Verse 6, Nevertheless, the journey was so long that many lost faith, and were not heedful of the words of God. And some of them strayed off amongst the Ahuans, the barbarians, and were lost. Verse 7, Of the 6,000 migrants there were lost 10 tribes, and in all 386 people, men and women. Some were lost in one place and some were lost in another. Verse 8, God said, Sing ye songs of lamentation to my chosen who are lost. The FAITHISTS in Jehovah, for this also shall become a matter of record to the end of the world. So here it states, out of the 6,000 migrants, 10 tribes were lost on their journey back to their homelands. And the 10 tribes equaled out to be 386 people who became lost on their journey. And the place of where the 10 tribes occupied was the land of Persia. And this is the beginning of the Persian nation out of these 10 lost tribes, and this coincides with Genesis chapter 11 verse 2, where it states, "And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there." This verse of a people coming from the east, finding a land and settling, is the 10 lost tribes that became lost on their way back from the lands of the east, which would be the lands of Shem and Japheth. And being lost, they settle in the plains of Shinar, which is Iraq, but would have been considered Persia in those times. And these lost tribes could more likely be from the tribes of Shem and Ham. It was the Cushites, Nimrod, who was the founder of the ancient lands of Iraq. Now, verse 9 it states, "Nevertheless, a time shall come when the Lord your God shall reveal the mystery of this day." Verse 10. So when the people had returned to their respective places, behold, they all sang songs of lamentation for the tribes that were lost. Verse 11. God said, I have shown you the far off people. I have marked out the road. Keep the road open. Keep the travel open between the great countries I have shown. Verse 12. Every 11 years shall one expedition start to the far off countries, and if perchance ye find my chosen, bring them home. So here it states that when the 3 tribes, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, returned to their homelands, they made songs of lamentation, and it stated every 11 years an expedition to the far-off countries in search for the lost tribes, and if by any chance finding them, returning them back to the homelands. So here it's showing that these 10 lost tribes got lost on their journey back, and the land that they occupied was now the land we call Persia today. And this is the beginning of the Persian nation, starting from these group of people, these lost tribes. And in other documentaries as I go along, you're going to see and look back how it all ties in. Now, the Lord's fourth book, chapter 4, verse 21 through 24, it states, Now the Lord's fourth book, chapter 4, verse 21 through 24, it states, In the beginning of the cycle of Thor, the Lord opened up many ways for the deliverance of the tribes of men on earth, and man prospered in the way of God for a long season. Verse 22. Then darkness came upon the races of men. Millions of them returned to a state of savagery, and angels of darkness came upon the earth, verily taking upon themselves the semblance of corporeal forms, and dwelling with mortals, and engaging in practices whereof it is unlawful to write or speak. Verse 23. So that at the termination of 3,000 years the lands of the earth were covered with darkness. Verse 24. And Jehovah cast a veil over the face of the sun, and it shone not in brightness for many years. So here it states at the beginning of the cycle, man prospered in the way of God, but toward the end of the cycle, man descended back to a state of ignorance. And it stated that Jehovah cast a veil over the sun, and it shone not. This would produce a decline in the planetary temperature, which would affect the earth for many years. And this period coincided with the so-called ending of the Ice Age, or the so-called last Ice Age. Now in the book of Thor, son of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 13, 14, and 16, it states, Thus went the earth into great darkness during the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor, and there was no harvest from her for the Etherian heavens. But the spirits deserted Atmospheria in millions and millions, and went down to the earth to dwell with mortals, and to find places on the corporeal earth where to live. Verse 14. Except the Ions, the light of Jehovah was shut out from men. Thus ambition for improvement was at an end. They became as drowns and vagabonds, and when they died, their spirits continued to lie about in the places of their mortal life. And many of these spirits persuaded mortals to suicide, and they killed themselves by the thousands and 10,000s. Nor was there courage more among men to endure anything under the sun. They wanted to be with the spirits of the dead, to talk with them, to see them, and to be rid of earth trials. verse 16. Thus ended the cycle of Thor, and it was 3,200 years. So here this verse describes what took place the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings and catch you on the next documentary called Osiris the First and the Shepherd Kings. Peace. Shalom.